It is amazing what we talk about when we're right before the record button. We're talking about heat, talking about heat indices, talking about desert dust, and we've talked about a lot of things. But one of the things I just want to mention, Sam, before I even introduce Rainer on leadership and this particular segue, we had talked about this earlier. But have you seen some of the stories come out of church growth services and their stewardship stories?
Yeah, Mike sends us some from time to time, and just amazing stuff that's happening with church growth services and Mike Stottlemyre.
Yeah. I think ever since he got that new eBook, 5 Generosity Megatrends, he's gotten a lot of attention. I don't know if we have it in the show notes, but I'll make sure we get it there. Anyway,
we'll put it in the show notes.
We'll do it. I like to talk about some of our partners just because there's some great things that are going on. Hey, speaking of partners, our partner, Tyndale, whom we absolutely love the relationship in so many different ways. We could go on and on about that. We are featuring one of their books, and it's called, and it's the author in it is called, let me say that again. The author is Greg Pruitt, and the book is called Extraordinary Hearing, Preparing Your Soul to Hear from God. And this is just a question that you pastors get quite often. How do I know if God's speaking to me? How do I know that he spoke to people in the Bible? How can I hear more clearly when I pray? You don't hear many books about extraordinary hearing, but this is a great book, and we want to recommend it to you. Now that I've gotten my words correct, I will then pause for a moment and say this is going to be one of my favorite podcasts because I get to interview my eldest son, Sam Rainer. This was my decision. I want you to know Sam had absolutely nothing to do with it. I don't even know if he agreed to it. I just said we were going to do it. And all of a sudden,
I did not. You just said we're doing it.
We are doing it. And let me tell you why. Of course, there is familial bias. Always will be that. I get that. But you know, Sam, most of you who listen to Rainer on Leadership, you know him from the Church Answer side. Well, he is co-vocational. He is the lead pastor of West Bradenton Church in Bradenton, Florida. And it's an incredible story. And we've interviewed people with incredible stories, but his matches exceeds a lot, if not most of them. So I'm not going to let my son's church not get interviewed, to use a double negative, just because his son, it might indicate parental prejudice. I just want y'all to see. I want you to hear, see if you're on YouTube, hear if you're listening on your podcast app, like, review, all those kind of things, subscribe. If you have not heard this story, and most of you will not have, it is an incredible story of the church that shouldn't, that did, and we'll talk about that. So, Sam, I am the interviewer. Now you are the interviewee. Kind of a different position. Not that I'm usually the interviewee, but usually both of us are either talking or we're the interviewer. So the question I have for you, the story I know the answer to, but people may be asking, how did you end up in Southwest Florida? How did you specifically end up in Bradenton, Florida?
Yeah, there's the short answer, which is not good radio, which is God. But how did you end up there? Well, God told me to go.
Got it.
But that doesn't make for a very good interview. The practical side of it was I got fired from my last church. And what God told me to do was to go to the first church that offered me a job. And West Bradenton was the first church to step up and say, hey, we'd like for you to consider being our candidate for pastor. So I said, okay, that sounds great. Let's move forward. And there's obviously a lot more to this story than just that short explanation.
And I'll say again, I'm going to interject from the father point of view. There's no such thing as a not painful firing. I'm using a lot of double negatives. All firings are painful. This one was especially so. It was definitely unwarranted. It was definitely a lot of bad stuff going on that should not have been going on. But Sam left graciously and gracefully, stepped away as he was being forced out by a power group in the church for reasons I'm just not going to even get into because it'll make me mad again as his dad. But simply to say, I have always had a special affection for West B because they were the first one. You were, it was hardly any time before you lost your job and you got this job. It was a very short period. It's also a great.
Well, 6 months. So 6 months unemployed is hard.
Okay, okay, you're right about that. So I'll retract that statement. But it was also you were moving 1 week after the birth of my grandson, which was
Yeah. Yeah, and I do want to speak to some pastors that maybe have been through something similar as me. Everyone's story about, hey, I got pushed out is a little different. I was told that I needed to resign or some things would be said about me and my wife. So implying that they were going to just make stuff up. Um, so I really didn't have a choice. So I know people say, well, you didn't technically get fired, you resigned. And it's like, one and the same. Um, and I'll just, and I know you don't like bringing it up because it makes you angry, but it's been 8 years now. It's over 8 years now. So I just want people to learn from my experience. I stood up for something that I believed in. There was a convicted predator that a power group was trying to put into a place of leadership. And that snowballed into any number of things with this power group. And that was something that, they wanted done, something that I said, no, as long as I'm the pastor here, this ain't happening. And they pushed me out over it. So, there are things worth standing up for, I guess. There are things that are worth your job. There are things that, if you've been pushed out and you believe in what you said and what you did, hold your head high. I just want to offer that encouragement to everyone. I have plenty of regrets. And people say, do you have any regrets in life or regrets in ministry? Of course I do. There's plenty of things I would change if I could. Uh, Standing up for what I believe is right in this case, I wouldn't change a thing. So
absolutely.
God used it in a way that was ended up being very good for my family. Yeah, it hurt, but West Bradenton is, and we've had our ups and downs at West Bradenton too. But man, it has been an incredible church. So through all of that, 6 months unemployed, God bless me with an amazing neighborhood church that is West Bradenton, and it's home. You go where God calls, of course, but it's home. I love it there. My kids are thriving. My wife loves it. Um,
Your dad loves
the
it.
church, yeah, the church. Yeah, I know you like Bradenton too. It's an amazing place. And it's wild because when I moved there, the town it has changed a lot in 8 years. There were some rougher seasons for Bradenton, particularly with the heroin epidemic that was there when I first arrived. And through some government changes and some policies that are in place, the entire state of Florida has been cleaned up for the most part. And Bradenton is kind of one of the shining examples of moving in a better direction. Let me just say that in terms of the town itself. Ministry has changed since I've been there through the pandemic. Lots of people moving in from all over the country, wanting to move to Florida. So it's just a great. Let me just say this: it's just a great place to be right now.
I absolutely love the town. Absolutely love the church. And I don't know, Sam. For some reason, January is one of my favorite months there. Haven't quite figured that out, but just
Yeah,
love
January through
Bradenton.
March tends to be a lot of people's favorite in Bradenton.
Oh, I love that weather there. Okay, we talked about how you got to the church. You would never mention this, but I will. A lot of churches have come calling. A lot of churches want to know if you're interested in becoming their pastor. A lot of big churches, a lot of churches that, if I were to give the names, most of the audience would recognize it right away. And ultimately, when it was said and done, you felt the call was secure and you were supposed to be at West B. What's kept you there?
Well, a lot of things has kept me there. Again, the short answer is God.
Right. Yeah.
That's such.
A good
Hey, Dad,
answer.
did you know that the church is not a building? There's,
I haven't heard that. You mean the people are the church? I have never heard
yeah.
that before. So,
And why do you do what you do? Well, it's a calling of God.
God,
It's okay. But there are certain things you can say that, like, you shut down the conversation. What's kept me there? So I want to be practical. I don't want to gloss over the calling of God in my life, but that's ultimately a very individual thing, a family thing. It's hard for me to even describe, well, God told me to do this. And, even then I hesitate to say those words because those can be very dangerous words because no one can argue with them, right? Well, if God told you to do it, then I guess it is what it is. But from a practical standpoint, I believe in the neighborhood church movement that I think needs to happen in the United States. Got a book coming out here at the time of this airing in about a month,
Mm.
called The Surprising Return of the Neighborhood Church. One, from a practical standpoint, it'd really be weird to try to lead a movement of neighborhood churches and to write about it and to be a part of it if you're at a very large, if not mega church, that's got a regional approach to ministry. So there's just the idea that I feel like I can add a lot of value myself with neighborhood churches and churches that are 250 people and under. West Bradenton is bigger than that, but we're still very much a neighborhood church, and that's our model of ministry. So, that's part of it. What's kept me there. Geography has kept me there. Nobody has called from Alaska, and if they did, I'd gladly take the phone call because I'm sure that they're kind and amazing people up there, and we have some church answers people that are up there. But that
Even
ain't
North
for me.
Pole, Alaska.
I know that ain't for me. Like I want to go one day because I hear it's an amazing place, beautiful.
It
But
is.
there's this
It's a
thing
beautiful
called
state.
winter. There's this thing called winter, and I don't like winter unless it's in Bradenton and it's January. So there's
Mm.
geography. There's family. My kids are thriving at their schools, in the church. My wife loves it. So you add all that together. Hey, I just fit here in the culture. Hey, I love this place. Hey, my kids are doing well. My wife is doing well. The church seems to be receiving my leadership. Okay, they respect me, and I feel very much at home in my own church. So you throw all that together, and yeah, you get into your 40s and nowadays, and everybody's calling because all these baby boomer pastors are retiring. There's always another church to go to. So I look at it like, you know, it would have to be God again that just said, leave all of this good stuff behind and go someplace else. It would just have to be something so big that God just pushed me to do because I'm in a very good place professionally, personally, emotionally, spiritually, church wise, all of the things. So that's what's kept
I
me there.
think
It's a
it's.
convergence of lots of factors.
I want to add to the convergence. During some of your most formative years as a child, you were in Southwest Florida, in St. Petersburg, Florida, just across the Skyway Bridge from Bradenton, and that shaped you a whole lot. When you went to Bradenton, one of the things you said quite often early and still do is, "I love the people here." You fit well in a Midwestern context, which is what Bradenton is. It's not a Southern context. You were raised in a church in St. Petersburg that was formative, that was Midwestern context. So I would add that to the mix of why you feel like this is part of a call for you.
Yeah, I've pastored two churches in smaller towns. And those are the only two times in my life that I've ever really, at least formatively, lived in a small town. I learned a lot about myself through the one of them ended up working out really well in Murray, and then the previous church not so much. So I also learned that I'm a city boy, and Bradenton is not a big city, but it's still in a large urban area. And St. Pete is very much urban when we lived there because we weren't in downtown, but close. So yeah, it's home. A lot of formative years were spent in this area. I pastored here once before as well in Southwest Florida. So I
In
just
Sarasota.
learned,
Yeah.
well, technically Manatee County. I lived on just the other side of the county, but yes, the Sarasota area. Um, and you gotta get to a point where you know yourself. Like there's some people that thrive in a small town at a certain kind of church or, a First Baptist kind of church. There's other people that, hey, I know the suburbs really well and I can do well in suburban Dallas, suburban Atlanta. There's others that are like, give me a city, give me high rises, give me concrete. That's me. Um, so I think there's also just this part of as you grow up in ministry, and by grow up, I mean you're in ministry. I'm coming up on 20 years now. You just kind of learn who you are, what you're good at, and where you need to be. And so I just feel like, hey, I'm not the best pastor. My church will tell you that. I'm certainly not the best preacher. I'm average.
You're above
But it's just
average,
like
way above
it's
average.
just where I need to be. So I absolutely love what I'm doing right now, and I've got a lot of great people that I get to shepherd.
And then I'm going to challenge you to let us get these last three questions in. Okay. Why do you call the church a neighborhood church for the nations? I think that is one of the most incredible tags for a church. What happened there?
Yeah, well, what happened was the Great Commandment and the Great Commission, and I just put
Oh,
them
the
together.
Bible, God. You've got a lot of answers today.
Yeah, love God, love others, right? There's certain taglines that churches have used, and so I spent a year, drawing on a whiteboard and putting out vision statements and just trying to figure out, okay, what's the next 20 years at West Bradenton? What's the next 30 years at West Bradenton? And it was the Sunday when we had an elderly couple. Both of them have since passed. And when we had a lot of older people, we had a parking problem because they come in ones and twos, and we have 4.5 acre campus with very limited parking. Now that we're a younger church, most of our 35% of our congregation is 18 and under now, so they're coming in fours and fives in the cars. So one way to solve a parking problem is to get younger as a church. But I'll never forget this elderly couple. They could not find a parking spot. And it was one of our higher attendance Sundays. It wasn't Easter, but it was one of those Sundays. And so we have these columns out front, the steps that lead up to the columns, and they just parked right there on the steps.
There you
Because
go.
and then and it hit me. That's what it hit me. I was like, we physically can't be a mega church at this campus. Like we literally do not have enough parking spaces for that to happen unless we have like 6 services. And that's when it hit me, like this model of ministry, this myth of exponential and infinite growth. Like every church has a point at which it really can't grow anymore, right? You can't grow exponentially every year. The math literally will not work.
Because
So,
you'll have the world's population in just a few years.
right, yeah, eventually it just gets into that doubling effect, and it's like we've got 1 billion people in our church. Well, you can't keep doing that. So there's just from a statistical standpoint. Let me put it that way: your church can't double every year. It's not that. There's a myth of grow, 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 grow. Every church needs to grow, and you need to replace the people that are passing on and moving on, of course. So sometimes growth is just replacing people, but which is what we've done a lot of at West Bradenton. But it hit me that Sunday. I was like, we can't do mega church here. It's not going to work. So we've got to do something else. And that something else, through this long process of trying to figure it out, Great Commission, Great Commandment, was a neighborhood church where we're going to reach just the people right around us, 34209, 34205, those 2 zip codes. And we're going to be for the nations, which is obviously the mission of God to go to the ends of the earth, and also implies all people. We want to reach all people. Multi-everything church, multi-ethnic, multi-site, multi-venue, multi-socioeconomic
Multi-generational.
class, multi-generational. Yeah, all the multis. So that's the neighborhood church for the nations.
I love it. You've shown a lot of tactical patience at West B. Talk to us about I was going to ask it in the yes or no. I'm just going to say, talk to us about those periods of discouragement and frustration that you have had. You don't have to give specifics. Just talk to us about how you handled it.
Yeah, I mean, we've had plenty of ups and downs. Some of them I couldn't do anything about. Some of them I caused. You make a bad decision, a bad hire. You make a bad call on a strategic, direction for the church. No leader bats 1,000, so you're going to have those times where you just mess up. That's certainly been the case for me. But when it comes to wanting to move forward, which I think most leaders, which is you don't get into leadership and take all the shots that people put your way. If as a pastor, you want to move forward. I mean, you don't endure all of that unless you truly want to do something. So The way that I endure through the tougher times, through the valleys, through getting a no, like, we're not going to be able to do that for whatever reason, is I have an outlet to where I can actually, get that itch scratched. And I call it church answers. And that's one reason I love, that's what I love being co-vocational, because, okay, well, I'm going to have to put this on hold at the church. I'm going to work on this over here at Church Answers. And you can only move so fast in a church, particularly an established church. I mean, there's only so much emotional energy, strategic energy. There's only so much that people can do. You cannot be, that overly pushy leader. You can't be an Elon Musk at your church. You can't be, Steve Jobs at your church. They may be great entrepreneurs, and some would argue that whether they are or not, but they certainly have been successful. But you can't treat your church that way. Like, you have to wait sometimes for things to settle to move forward. And so I have a way to get that itch scratched. Not everyone needs to be co-vocational, of course, but you need an outlet. You need something else that you can do, so that you're not trying to push yourself on your church and to make something happen that's outside of God's timing.
I wish that more and more pastors would hear this the way you're telling it. Again, it doesn't mean that you have to go work for Church Answers, but it does mean that, hey, I may have to do something voluntary or something co-vocational in order to be the person I am fully. And here's the thing I love about it. Church Answers and Thom got a double wind in this, in that we got you in leadership at Church Answers, and which helps you to stay in Bradenton, Florida, which I want you to stay in Bradenton, Florida, because I want to keep coming.
Yeah, no, you love to visit. You absolutely love to visit. Yeah, I do have no plans. In case I know some church members are listening. Miss Margaret, I love you. I'm not planning on going anywhere. I'm quite happy where I'm at.
All right. Tell us the relationship between pastoral tenure and some of the victories that you've had at West B. 8 years, right?
8, yeah, right at 8, if not a little over 8 by the time this airs. It is so underrated. Pastoral tenure, stay in a place a while. You've heard the stats. You've heard the people say, you can't be the pastor until 5 years in, and we've heard these things. You've got to stick it out a while in order to really start accomplishing things. It's true. It is absolutely 100% true. How much of because we're in a good season as a church right now, how much of is that due to pastoral tenure and just sticking it out? I don't know. I can't put a percentage on it. And I certainly don't want to act like anything any sort of success of the church is due to me, because I've got really good people. But there is something to, oh yeah, we know Sam. Oh yeah, he's my pastor. Yeah, he's kind of weird, yeah, he has these foibles. Like, everyone knows me at this point. And I can walk into a room and just chat, and there not be weird and awkward and people wondering what's your motive, what's your agenda, what's your angle. Everybody knows at this point, and they've just kind of accepted me as I am. And I do try to always become a better pastor, but there's just so much to pastoral tenure and just being at a place for longer than 5 years. Because it was 5-6 years for me with the pandemic. And now that I'm 8 years in, now starting my 9th year, I definitely feel like it's awesome. I feel like, okay, I know these people, they know me. We don't always agree on everything, and that's fine, but at least we understand each other's hearts. And that just takes time. And you don't get that without time.
An incredible story, an incredible church, incredible leader. Sam Rainer, West Bradenton Church, Bradenton, Florida. So many principles that you can learn just from this. I get the opportunity not only to interview him, but to do both sponsors, because he's not going to introduce or talk about the sponsor in the show where he was interviewed. I'm going to do both of them. Our closing sponsor is California Baptist University. You probably heard me talk about them. There's some updates. First of all, let me give you what we've been talking about. Get your high school students, get your sophomores, juniors, seniors to take some courses at California Baptist University. The first course is free. And listen to this now. Other courses, instead of the $613 per credit, are $166 per credit. So you get the first course free. You get a huge discount on subsequent classes. You got more than 30 courses to choose from. You get college credit. You're in a classroom. Now it's asynchronous, which means that you can access it at your own convenience. But those who will be studying with you are also college students, as well as some high school students. And so you get to sit in on a real college course in a real college setting, although, of course, it is online. Look at this opportunity. Pastors, tell your church members about it. Tell your adults to tell their students about it. Sophomore, juniors, and seniors. Or you can go to the link in the show notes, calbaptist.edu/PCC. You can look that up and you can get that information. Great, great, great opportunity and a great university to do so. Well, once again, we thank you for listening to what I think is probably my favorite podcast in history. Podcast where I got to interview Sam about his leadership at West B Church, a church, a neighborhood church for the nations. Thank you for being at Rainer on Leadership. We'll be talking in the next few episodes about pastoral attire and how you reach new residents. Stay tuned. We'll be talking about that later. Hey, folks, this is a PS to our podcast. We got some exciting stuff that we want to offer you absolutely for free. Sam, when you think about predictive factors in a church's growth, if you take out demographics, what are some things that come to mind? Just two. I mean, don't give me a list of 10. Just two or three things that come to mind on predictive growth of a church.
Well, evangelism and whether the church is doing it or not.
Bingo.
And then I will add, is it an ongoing evangelism emphasis?
Double bingo. And maybe something about leadership and their commitment to that. So all of the above.
Evangelistic churches have evangelistic pastors. Is the staff, is the lead pastor doing the work themselves?
We have a free download for you, and it's actually a sheet that you can self-score. You answer 20 questions, anywhere from strongly disagree to strongly agree. And we come back and we predict what your growth rate is going to be for the next year in worship attendance. It's not a perfect tool, but it's a good tool. There's a link to that for the attendance predictor. Look in the show notes. You'll absolutely love it. That's cool. We'll see you soon.